Welcome to this presentation on Kevin the Drone on the Western Front. But first, some introductions. My name's Simon Davies, and I'm the founder of weare.xyz, an online platform for building family archives and one-place studies. And today I'm going to go into a sad tale from my own family's archive concerning my grandfather's cousin, George Henry Jones Davies, and his last moments at the Battle of Messines. I first found out about him in a newspaper article in the Shrewsbury Chronicle that talked about this book, which is called If You're Reading This, and featured the last letter home to his mother. This is my family's archive. You can see me in the center, and the first thing we need to do is find George. He's my grandfather's cousin. So here's my grandfather. Scoot over to the left, past his uncles and aunts. Here's his uncle John Davies, and here's his son George Davies. You can see he's got all these siblings. Another one died in the war as part of the Egyptian Expeditionary Force. And this son, Brian, actually died of Spanish flu in 1918. So by the end of the war, they'd lost 3 sons. Looking at George, I want to take you through his life of adventures. So George trained as a Methodist minister and went as a missionary out to Australia in 1915. And there he enlisted with the Australian Imperial Force and probably came straight back, ultimately to meet his fate on the Western Front. Now, I have various things to do with George, and one thing I have is the 184-page diary that he wrote, which gives great insights into his thoughts and feelings during the campaign. And I've written up various pieces on George, but I'm going to take you through my final analysis, or my analysis rather, of his final days. I did a considerable amount of research and was greatly helped by the amazing Australian War Memorial Library in Canberra. They have a phenomenal set of digital records. And to begin with, they sent me his 184-page diary. But then I was able to go back and pick out unit war diaries. And from then onwards, I was on the trail of where he finally met his end. So in this article I've written on my analysis, I give a bit of background on World War I, my own theory on how it came to be, that horrible, fruitless conflict. And here's some background on the Battle of Messines and Passchendaele. So he was part of the Battle of Messines, but the Battle of Messines was actually the precursor to Passchendaele. And it all took place around Ypres salient here, where the Allies were, and then this high ground where the Germans were along here, and they wanted to push them back off the high ground in the Battle of Messines here on Messines Ridge before pushing on to Passchendaele later. So let's have a look. A great help to me was the Western Front Association's trench mapper and the ability to access trench maps from around the time. So this is actually where he was situated during the Battle of Messines. And the big push, as told to me by the unit war diaries, entailed George and his company assembling at Prowse Point, having walked through via Maison 1875 through Plug Street Wood, being shelled with gas, and eventually getting to the assembly point, Prowse Point, at 3:10 in the morning, where they were due to and did in fact detonate 19 massive mines that obliterated 10,000 Germans instantly. So Prowse Point, in the unit war diaries for his brigade, his battalion, the 36th Battalion, we find that D Company, which is his, was on the left at Prowse Point in a deep, fairly safe piece of trench off Ontario Avenue. Well, on this trench map, this is Prowse Point, this is Ontario Avenue, and that means that he was based in this strip of blue here. So I traced that onto a satellite image so I could see what was on the ground. I had a good bit of luck when I went out there. In the Passchendaele Museum, I stumbled across a video of Prowse Point. This is in 1915, but we can see the actual spot where he went through when he assembled a couple of years later. And here's myself, all lycra'd up. I cycled around the battlefield with a friend, and my arm is pretty much following where that trench was. Behind me, you can see Plug Street Wood, so where he came out of that wood, and then up into this trench on July the 7th, 1917 at 3 in the morning. So various other unit war diary pieces. And then having pushed out of Prowse Point and got through the initial assault of the Battle of Messines, He was moved onto a place called Grey Farm, where they conducted an assault on German trenches in La Poterie Farm. Again, more unit war diaries, grid references, and I followed his progress over the next few days, because although he started on, actually, I correct myself, it was 7th of June, not July. He wasn't going to die until the 12th of July. So he was involved in all sorts of activity, including this one here, where he went from Grey Farm across these fields to La Poterie, before he actually met his end after the initial assault. So he had a brief respite in that period where he went behind the lines. See how I've got him going back, and then he came forward again to the positions at the top here. And this is where he's finally going to meet his end, I'm afraid. And for that period, this document told me that he was in D battalion area. 36th Battalion was going to D battalion area, which meant nothing to me. But the Great War Forum, I discovered the Great War Forum, and a wonderful gentleman there sent me this and said, D battalion is on this map. It's that area in yellow. And his 40 years of knowledge, he was able to rack his brain and remember that. So I knew that's where he was. And looking at it more closely, actually, he was in this trench here. Here's his battalion HQ. The front is about a quarter of a mile up here near Gapard. Here is this green line is a railway, a push railway for taking the injured and the dead back. Here's a relay post where they could offload the injured and the dead. And here's Fanny Farm up here, which, remember that, we'll come back to that in a minute. So tracing all that onto a satellite image, this is where it all happened. He's based up here in this trench piece here. And that crossroads is where I ended up with Kevin the drone to send him up in the air and film this all this area. So looking down through the unit war diaries, here's a record of his death on the 12th of July, Private Davies. He's in D company, and you'll see he loses 2 other comrades. Actually, I think they're all on the 12th, because Cross, there's actually, so Private Cross you see here, Private Cross, there is a Red Cross witness statement for his death, which proved an invaluable clue for me. And somebody in the Great War Forum found it for me and sent it to me, which is amazing. And in this report, it basically says that this guy, Private Cross, he saw a shell land right in their dugout. His arm was almost severed, and a big piece of timber was driven right through his chest. He called out, his death was almost instantaneous. Seen his grave. The service was read by Signaller Davies, my ancestor, who got killed the same evening. The grave is on the right of Fanny Farm, well, he means Fanny Farm, east of Messines. There were about 6 graves there then. So what we've got, especially if we piece it together, let me show you this other piece of document I have, which I found myself earlier. It always said that George Davies was killed after Messines whilst burying 2 friends. And what we can work out is that as a Methodist missionary, basically a minister, he would have been asked to conduct services over the dead when they buried them in impromptu little graves in clusters on the battlefield. So he was up to the east of Fanny Farm, burying people that day. He buried Private Cross earlier, and he was up there burying more later in the day when the shells rained down on him and he was killed. So from this German howitzer, we know, and here is a division report that somebody else on Great War Forum sent me, saying that 60 rounds rained down on him. It gives the grid references. Here are the grid references that those shells fell on at the time of his death. And you can see they fall right on that relay post in the area to the east of Fanny Farm here. So we know that basically he was in here burying soldiers, comrades, when shells came down into his life. He was never found. He's recorded on the Menin Gate. I guess he may be an unknown soldier in a cemetery somewhere, but he's on the Menin Gate for now. Here's some aerial footage from later, at some point in the war. And here is Kevin's drone footage of the area. Remember where I said that he took off from. So he, and you will see now, is flying towards, think of that push railway going underneath us towards that bend in the curve where the medical station is. And up here to the right are the fields where they would have been burying and where he was standing when he was killed. That's Fanny Farm over there. So he was killed somewhere down there. And this is moving up towards Messines. So they've captured the Messines Ridge and they're coming over the other side. And that is Messines itself, actually. Top left, we'll see in a second there. And the fact you can climb up that tower and get a great viewpoint. If you look back south, that's actually Plug Street Wood on the horizon where he came through from Prowse Point. He came over all this land ultimately. And then when we turn around, the front is up ahead of us. And this is the territory that he spent his last couple of days in. So let's just stop that. That's Kevin's bird's eye view. And what I did was, oh sorry, first of all, this is a picture of an actual push railway near the front line in Messines, so we can see what it was like. And I went into this area that I identified was where he died. And what I did was I scooped up some mud. Here it is. And that mud from Flanders, I'm going to bury outside the farmhouse. And this is the farmhouse where he grew up. I'm going to reunite that with where he came from. And I'll just end by reading a wonderful piece that from George's diary, all about that mud. Trench conditions are not the best. One wallows in a sea of mud. One's clothes get muddy. The rifle is absolutely hidden in mud. Mud here, mud there, mud everywhere. You walk in mud, you talk in mud. You look over a parapet of mud, and a paradise of mud is behind you. When a shell strikes in your vicinity, it covers you with mud. When you eat food, you find it spread over with mud, and your breakfast, dinner, tea, and supper is bread and mud. These were our conditions when in 1916 AD we fought the Germans, or the Boche, or the Hun. Private George Henry Jones Davies, 11th of December 1916. And I will end my presentation there. Thank you very much for listening. If you'd like to try out our platform, weare.xyz, please do check us out at the website here. We have a YouTube channel, check out the videos. We have a newsletter each month, which we try and keep jolly and interesting. And we have a really lovely community in our Facebook group where people show what they've been up to. And please feel free to come in there and join us at any time.